Welcome to the StarCraft 2 World Championship Series America Season 3 Round of 16 presented by Newegg. That was quite the title. Well, that means we have quite the StarCraft for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Group C. Why Group C? Because America. That's why. I'm your host, Joshua Clutch Gray, and I'm excited to see these four players battle it out for their chance to make it to the round of 8, where they can have a chance to take home $25,000 for first place. But that's not all. Each of these players will be competing for that coveted points for WCS, for BlizzCon happening in November. The top 16 players will be able to battle it out for a prize pool of $250,000. The first place player taking home $100,000. Now, each of these players today has a chance to make it to BlizzCon. One already secured his spot. The other three must make it to first place in this tournament. Here at ESL America in Burbank, California, we're ready. The question is, audience, are you ready? That was a very resounding yes from our live audience here, but I'm going to throw it on over to my friend and fellow host, Cam Dozer and QXC. Gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you very much, Josh. I am Cameron Cam Dozer Reed, hanging out here at the social corner with Kevin QXC Riley, who's back with us on WCS America, going to be doing some guest commentating again. Kevin, it's really good to see you, man. How you been?
Good. Since the last time I've been here, I've kind of gone on an adventure. I was in China, then Taiwan, then to Detroit, which was an adventure all of itself, to Toronto, finally back to Pittsburgh, and now back in California, starting off with Group C. Some great games ahead of us.
Yeah, now let's talk about some of the matches that we know are going to be happening. First up, we have Jim versus Bomber. I can't imagine much of a tougher draw for Jim to start his round of 16 than Bomber. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Bombers looked quite good recently off a relatively recent win in Red Bull Atlanta. Wait, that's right, isn't it? Yeah, okay. I thought, okay. Anyway, and a couple of seasons ago, Bomber actually defeated Jim in the entry qualification to WCS 3-0. But since then, Jim has been much more on form. Most recently, we saw him take down Tasia in the IEM Shenzhen. And it's really hard to say exactly who can come out on top. Bomber is the favorite, though, for sure.
Well, speaking of hard to say, the next match that we're going to have is going to be Czech versus Huck. This one, I think, for me personally at least, is a lot harder to predict because Huck has been looking really strong. He's had a much better 2014 than his 2012 and 2013 runs. Who do you think is going to come out on top in that one?
Recently, Huck, especially at Toronto, he was able to take down notable Zergs such as Lenok and Jaedong. But Czech is not to be underestimated. Even though we haven't seen much of him, he doesn't travel quite as much as a player like Huck. He's still an exceptionally good player. And I think his kind of unknown status may work for his favor against Huck. Huck's not going to know quite as much of what to expect, whereas Czech should have plenty of resources about how to study Huck, what he's been doing recently, what his tendencies are.
All right, well, thank you very much for your thoughts. I can't wait to hear you on the desk, given that energy, that analysis that we came to expect last time. I want to give another big shout out to our sponsor, Newegg. We're going to be throwing out a bunch of promo codes at everybody watching at home down in the lower part of the screen during the matches, so you can save yourself some money on all the computer parts. And I also want to know, because later I'm going to be interviewing some of the people who advanced to the round of 8, and I want to know the questions that you at home want me to ask. Tweet your questions at Cam Dozer, that's me, using the hashtag WCS. It's also kind of a cool way for the people at home to share their predictions, who they think is going to advance. So look, I'll be right back with another interview. That's a pre-match interview with Jim and Bomber. But for now, let's kick it over to the guys at the desk, Nate and Roddy.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Thank you very much, Josh. And of course, Kev as well. Awesome to have QXC here again. Nate, it's been a while since we were sitting here. We were really busy over the last month. And then suddenly, after IEM Toronto, it felt like I landed in the void. There was just nothing, Nate.
Yeah, I had a couple days off, but we're ready to get back into the StarCraft action. What an exciting group to start things off with, I think we could say. Good friend of ours, Bomber, coming into play today will be a great player to see kick things up. But also Jim, Huck, two guys that we've been following very closely. And then, you know, the feel weird to say it player, Czech as the underdog.
Yeah, underdog, maybe more like a dark horse, because we
Yeah.
don't really know as much about him as we do about the other three. But let's just take a look at the entire round of 16 drawing, just in case you forgot, because what was it that made Nate and me so excited just a couple of weeks ago? Well, this is it. We were super happy with our group drawing. I think we were super happy with our entire round of 32, because it was A, so much fun to cast, and B, we had a lot of fan favorites going through, a lot of results that you kind of hope for, because you know that people want to see those guys. You want to see them go further as well. This is it, Group A, B, C, and D. We're starting off with Group C today. And when this group got drawn, I said, and I quote myself, I think this is a group that I think all of these guys are quite happy with. And that sounds kind of weird, but of course all of these players are confident. And if you look at it, like, yeah, Bomber is very confident. We know that he looked at this group and he's like, I'm already in round of 8. He even said that pretty much off the record, but we can always quote Bomber because he has no secrets for us. Bomber really thinks that he's going to advance. Then you have Jim, and if you look at it, it's like, well, that's an okay group for Jim. Only one Terran. We know that that has been a matchup in which he has struggled a little bit in the past. Huck could have been so much worse for him. I think this is a group that Huck looks at. It's like, well, I can do that too. And Czech probably looked at it and thinking like, this is my first time that I'm going to make the run of 8 because I can beat those guys too. So
Yeah, I think at the very least, all of them can say at least I didn't get put in Group B, because that's the nightmare group. And of course, if you guys, if you're looking at this, like, I know who's going to make it out of this group. We've been running the ESL Fantasy for the whole course of this season. You can sign up even today, fantasy.eslgaming.com/SC2. You pick one player from each group to advance on. And this is the best way you can brag to your friends. I do know StarCraft better than you.
yeah, and I'm actually really sad because I did pretty good in my round of 32, Nate. I was like ranked 165 out of 2,800 people. So I was like, that's pretty good. It's kind of, because a couple of the results, they were unpredictable, you know. I am not that 45-year-old housewife that somehow predicted I guess to win Group B, whatever it was. There was someone who quoted me on Twitter. It's like, well, I am that woman, and I was right. So like, well, I applaud you because I couldn't have called it. But I was too late for my today's group, but it doesn't matter. Even if you missed today, you can still fill in the other 3 groups, and there are still so many points to be earned, so you guys should definitely go ahead and wrap up your team. You think you can catch up with me, Nate?
No. You said you're in top 200, man.
Yeah.
I'm sitting somewhere like 800. I forgot to pick half my groups around 32.
It's okay, Nate. There has to be a difference.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway, we see that Cameron is ready with our first 2 players of today, so Cameron, take it away.
Thank you. I am standing here with our first 2 competitors of the day. To my right, we have Jim. To my left, we have Bomber. Jim, we were speaking earlier, and you had mentioned that you had a long flight to get here to Burbank. You were experiencing a little bit of jet lag this morning. How are you feeling now before your match?
就是你飞了很远过来嘛，然后还有时差的影响，你现在是什么样的感受？
还是有些时差的问题吧，就是我会尽力发挥的。
Actually, there is still a little jet lag effects, and I think I will try.
All right. Now, you had also mentioned that you had a very disappointing performance at the WEC. You told me yourself, I played so badly. What lessons, though, were you able to learn from that poor performance that you can apply today to hopefully do better?
就你之前不是刚打 WCS 嘛，然后你打 WCS 的时候那个发挥很差，然后你从中学到什么？然后这次过来的话，是否能发挥得更好一点？
学到了就是怎么去适应环境，然后调整状态，发挥出更好的实力吧。
I think I learned how to quickly adapt the environment, live environment, and adjust my status and show my real power. Yeah, maybe.
All right. Well, let's check in with Bomber. Bomber, you've mentioned a few times in past seasons that you've been getting older, that you haven't been focused as much on multitasking. How's your health today?
최진호 선수 이제 나이도 드시면서 멀티태스킹도 힘들고 좀 피지컬이 좀 낮아졌다고 스스로도 얘기를 하셨는데 오늘은 컨디션이 어떠신지요?
아까 굉장히 졸려서 잠을 좀 자고 나니까 지금 컨디션은 굉장히 좋은 것 같습니다.
I was really sleepy. I found the sofa, took a nap on it until we just started. So I'm feeling good right now.
Bomber, why are you always tired?
I don't know.
All right. Now, the last question I wanted to ask is, last season you were the runner-up in this tournament. Are you looking at this season 3 as an opportunity to take revenge?
자, 이제 저번 시즌의 결승전에서 안타깝게 이제 우승을 놓치셨는데 이번 시즌 이제 그 복수 혈전이 될지 이번 시즌 지금 바라보고 있는 최인수 선수의 생각 말씀해 주시죠.
제가 그룹 C에서 1위로 진출하고 그리고 그룹 B에서 양희수 선수가 2위로 진출하면 만날 가능성이 생기는데 그렇게 해서 8강에서 다시 갚아줄 수 있었으면 좋겠습니다.
So the theme of this WCS season 3 for me is, or here's a plan. I go up number 1 in my group. In Group B, Pig Baby comes up as a runner-up in the group. Meet him round of 8, give him a good beating for last time.
All right, very nice. Do you have any words for your opponent, Jim, before the match begins?
굿럭.
All right, Jim, do you have any words?
你赛前有什么话想对他说吗？
good luck.
All right, thank you very much. A lot of respect from both of these guys. We're got to get the map veto process sorted out right here, but for now, let's check back at the desk.
Thank you, Cameron. I love the cheeky smile of Bomber. Even
Good
before
luck.
he says anything, even before there's a single question asked, he knows that it's his turn and he just starts smiling. He's like, all right, it's time to be me.
Bomber's been he's been giving us a nice little bit of entertainment, and he's got the least amount of pressure on him, I would say, of the 4 in this group. Bomber, of course, he's pretty much secured himself a berth into the BlizzCon Global Finals taking place in November, so he's not as concerned with the WCS plans as anybody else. He's not concerned with the seeding. I know we kind of mentioned this. He's going to be playing in the Caspa Cup soon as well.
Yep.
And he's just here. He's playing for the prize money, pretty much.
Bomber doesn't really have a whole lot to lose, and he has a lot to win. He doesn't have to worry about WCS, and above all, this is not like a life-breaking amount of money that's on the line, even though there is so much. If you win the entire season, you walk away with $25,000, and that sounds a lot, but Bomber has won over $200,000 already, so of course you always want more, but this is not the first time he's playing for that amount of money. He's already used to the pressure. You know, if you think of Jim, you're like, all right, I know that Jim has done pretty well, but how much money has he really earned in his career? This must mean so much to him, and of course it does. But even Jim has collected over $60,000 already in his career, which I think surprises a lot of people if you think about it, because how often have we seen Jim on the big stage, but still already collecting over $60,000?
Yeah, as a player that we didn't really see popping up until WCS too much last year, he's certainly been running the circuit quite nicely. Looking at the map vetoes for this series, of course, it's Terran versus Protoss. A couple standard vetoes, I think. Not too surprised to see vetoes on Deadwing, Catalina. We've kind of ironed it down to a few maps that everybody seems to generally like. Keep in mind, of course, this is a best of 3.
Yeah, these are the 3 most standard maps right now, I think that's safe to say. King's Young Station, Merry-Go-Round and Overgrowth, 3 maps that most players are generally quite okay with. Merry-Go-Round is not ideal for a Protoss player, but we do know that Jim likes to bust out some 2-base shenanigans once in a blue moon, and Merry-Go-Round might just be the map for it. I'm a little bit surprised to see Bomber starting off videoing Catalina, because I know there are a few Protoss players, including my dear friend Litot. You know, even though we had a couple of weeks break, we still have to give a Litot reference now and then. He doesn't like Catalina at all.
No, well, I mean, it's got the same issues as Merry-Go-Round, doesn't it? You have a lot of different directions. A drop can come in. I guess Catalina has even more areas you can hit because you can drop from behind the main base. But I think going for the veto on Nimbus, I think, was also pretty interesting because he could have blocked out Merry-Go-Round and taken Nimbus, but he doesn't want that possible late game drop into the natural position happening.
I like what Cameron and QXC were talking about earlier. These 2 players have played against each other before. This was the first qualifier, or the challenger I should say, of WCS America Premier League in 2014, Season 1. It's the first time we used the new format. It was not 4 players in a group anymore. It was the single best of 5 that would determine whether or not you would qualify for Premier League. And back then, I was really pumped for that one. I thought it was going to be the biggest match of Challenger. Wasn't really the case. Bomber just kind of steamrolled Jim. He showed that there's a reason why he switched regions, and of course a lot of Koreans have switched regions, but something that I think a lot of people forget about Bomber is Bomber was not one of those Koreans that had a horrible 2013 in Korea and then switched regions. Like, no, the opposite is true. Bomber actually did pretty okay for himself in 2013. He made it to top 4 of BlizzCon. He gathered all of those points, mostly in Korean tournaments. So it's not like he was bad in 2013 and he needed to have an easier competition. Like, no, Bomber just went to America because he's like, well, all right, well, Korea is going to be very difficult. And I can do it, but I think I'll do better in America. But it wasn't like he couldn't cut it anymore in Korea.
Yeah, Bomber has, and he's put up solid results against pretty much everybody that he's had to go up against. That second place finish last season definitely did not come easily. It wasn't like Pig Baby just rolled him in the grand final. That was about as big of a slugfest. We kind of been talking about it. If it's a series that you missed out on, the grand finals was really something special last season. And Bomber, I don't think he's looking to have a repeat of a loss in that situation again.
And that was the same pick that did manage to defeat Tasia 3-0 a day before that. So that also kind of just shows how well Bomber is still playing. He recently went, after Bomber went here in WCS America Season 2, was the runner-up. He went to Atlanta, like the boys mentioned as well, at the social desk. He won Atlanta. That was fantastic for him. So he's qualified for the grand final of the Battlegrounds in DC later this year. I think since then he only participated in one major tournament, and that was the one in Taiwan. He didn't do super well over there. He did beat Jaedong, I believe, but after that he lost. Could have been against Lenok. I don't know who he lost to. But he lost in the quarterfinal. He didn't have a very deep run. However, Bomber is back. He wants to make another magnificent run. He is very confident. He is so confident, Nate, that I spoke with him about this. And I also even asked if I could talk about this on broadcast. And he's like, yeah, no problem. But he said today he's not even really showing his A game. Or he will bring his A game, but he won't necessarily play the best threats against Protoss. Because he has some builds specially prepared for Rain. Of course, he's going up against Rain in the Caspa Cup this weekend, a massive tournament in Korea. And Bomber said, like, I have some surprises for Rain and I don't want to show them today.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised by that at all. Bomber, he's the kind of guy that likes to bring out his own flavor, but Jim has been one of those guys we've also seen bring out his own kind of style, and maybe we'll see that in his series of today against Bomber, of course. I'm talking about that Phoenix Colossus, which has popped out quite a few times. Jim, though, he's definitely been the crown player from China in the last few years.
Yeah, even though 2014 hasn't been his best year in Premier League, Jim always has such a funny look on his face. He's stone cold, even when he stands there for interviews. I must say, I love the blue as well. That's kind of new, right, on the IG shirts? Because before it was just black and white.
I haven't been following their style trends right
I have. Those blue collars on Neil, Nate, I'm telling you, and I'm kind of digging it. Maybe I can back Edison for sure.
We got to get the hookups, man.
But yeah. Game number 1 is going to be played on Overgrove. Our players are almost ready. Nate's ready, I'm ready, and I can't wait to start our very first game of WCS America round of 16. This is Season 3. It's been a long season, but now we are on the way.
That's right, we're ready to kick things off. The first map, of course, for this series, this best of 3, is Overgrowth. And our first player spawning in the bottom left position, representing Invictus Gaming, the Red Protoss, he is Jim.
Jim is going up against a Blue Terran, who's spawning in the right top side of the map, of course, representing Red Bull. Give it up for Bomber.
It's funny that Bomber tells you, he's like, yeah, got some special builds prepped for Rain. I was talking to him, I'm like, Bomber, you gotta help me with my TvT game, man. He's like, if I play someone, I got some cool builds, I'll show you, no problem.
He is so confident as well. He was even talking with James a little bit outside, and James asking, like, how's the practice been going? And he said, which practice? I'm already advanced to the round of 8. I was like, oh, Bomber. But he has to be careful. I don't want to throw out the cliche of, like, you can never underestimate someone. But it is kind of true. We've seen it last weekend where Jim went out in WEC. From what I heard from his manager, he was preparing for those big names, you know, a Jaedong, a Hero. But in the end, he got eliminated by Top and Haas. That was relatively surprising. And that just shows you cannot underestimate anybody. And that's kind of important for Bomber today as well. He doesn't have to bring his special builds that he's been working for against Rain. But you still want to play rock solid, though, against these guys. You cannot underestimate anybody in the round of 16.
Yeah, I also think that there's nobody in this group that's as crazy as those two players that you just named. In the Chinese scene, I think we could say Top Haas certainly bring out the most unusual strategies that you'll possibly get. But for this game, we're not seeing anything crazy. A Probe Scout from Jim C's. It is a Reaper opening from Bomber. This is about as standard as you're going to get in this matchup. And we know that back in Jim's base, he's himself not doing anything too crazy, sitting on just one gas, so this doesn't look very different than a standard gateway expand.
Now, we already mentioned the Phoenix Colossus style a little bit. We kind of have to when we broadcast one of these Protoss players because they made it popular again in 2013, a style that we hadn't seen since 2011 pretty much. And suddenly it came back and a lot of players started playing Phoenix Colossus again. Even now, a couple of Korean Protoss players start doing it quite a bit, like Myungsik. He's been doing it like 3 or 4 times in some of the last games I've casted of him. But I personally don't think that Jim is going to do it. He tried it before against Bomber, and this is 6-7 months ago when Jim was practicing that style non-stop, and he couldn't get it to work. Now, if you try his style 3 games in a row against a guy, you lose 0-3. Would you try to do it again in the next best of 3, 4 or 5 months later?
Well, maybe, unless he's found some way to tighten things up. If he thinks playing in the offline environment versus the challenger match, then perhaps, but I think it's very difficult to compare the mindset these players must be in because the year has just developed so differently for them. And Bomber gets his Reaper in, he's getting that first scouting, sees, okay, he already spotted the Nexus, and he sees how late the second assimilator finishes. He knows he's not going to have to worry about really fast tech, especially since Jim's opened up with his Mothership Core and his Stalker, while also in Warp Gate. Like, he can't afford to have built any tech yet.
Bomber is a little bit of a trendsetter in this matchup as well, because he was one of the very first Terrans to ever use Wither Mines in his matchup, even way before they got the buff against Protoss players. Not just the new buff, the biggest splash radius, but even the shield buff. Bomber was already messing around with Wither Mines, and he was also one of the guys that went back to 3 racks before anybody else started doing it. But now if we take a look at his main base, Bomber is actually just on 2 racks, and that's really funny. Bomber just hates being mainstream, Nate. I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last thing that he'd want to do is have people say that he's playing standard, he's using other people's builds. Bomber's like, no, man, I want to put a Bomber brand on this one and make sure that when someone else uses it, everybody points at me as the guy that established this as a solid strat. And not surprising, 2 racks play was really popular, especially last year, right before the Blink craze started up. And it was, you could even say that the popularity of this build is why the Blink builds did so well. But this Reaper wants to get a follow-up scout. He will see the robotics facility before getting picked off. But, when you see that with a 2 barracks opening, you don't really have anything to worry about. It's not like he has to be concerned of a fast gateway push.
No, that is very unlikely, so it's a relatively okay scout there for Bomber. He also saw that it was a quick robotics facility. Now we see the first Immortal being produced, and I was kind of wondering about this, because of course Jim can take this build many ways. He can just take a very passive approach, he can rush up to Colossus, he can make a few Immortals and then go up to Colossus, but it could also just be a 2-base Immortal attack, and that is something that we have seen him do before. And didn't he even make it work against Stasia and IAM Sunset?
I think we've seen a couple players bust this out with a lot of success recently. It is hit or miss in certain instances. I think we've seen Huck kind of have some difficulty making it work in last season's WCS, or it might have even been this one. But second Immortal on the way does kind of give that vibe that you were mentioning, this aggressive tendency that we could see come out of Jim. He's only taken 1 gas. Yeah, he's only taken 1 gas in his natural. Adds on 2 more gateways, so it's going to be a straight up 5 gate. It's got to be 3 Immortal push.
I kind of thought it would be a 6 gate. I'd be very surprised if he sticks with 5 gateways.
Okay, he's going to 7.
Alright, yeah, that makes more sense. If he really wants to go crazy, he could do 8, but 8 is a little bit too much when you also go for Immortals, which are expensive units on its own. So this is kind of a hit or miss build. Like Nate said, for Protoss, there's really not a whole lot to it. There's not a whole lot that Jim can do from this point. It will all just come down to execution. Of course, if he's able to catch some units out of position from Bomber, that would be fantastic. But Bomber needs to identify this as soon as possible, then either decide to drop immediately, even before Jim starts attacking, or Bomber is just going to have to sit back and get a ton of bunkers ready. And as good as Immortals are against bunkers are still very useful.
Yeah, it's really weird because Stim is done for Bomber. So he has this very mobile, very high damage output army against a rather, at this point, it's still kind of smallish gateway force, but without a really good bunker backbone, like 1 bad fight and this game is pretty much over for Bomber.
Yep, this is going to get really close because Bomber is moving forward. He doesn't know about the spider on the left side though. This observer from Jim has been so incredibly important. But I'm not sure if I like this engagement by Jim though. I feel the Immortals are a little bit exposed. 1 Immortal will get picked off immediately.
Oh, he he boosts away before the Immortal comes down, and SCVs are pulled to the front to try to repair against this, but we know Bunker's not the greatest way to deal with Immortals.
Wow, I'm very shocked that Immortal didn't fall. Now there are still 3 Immortals alive. That was massive.
That's a super important kill to get. Yeah. Bomber's +1 attack is about to finish up. He's starting to add on barracks.
But he doesn't have a whole lot of units, Nate.
No, he doesn't. The medevacs are trying to heal these SCVs and Marauders holding the front of the lines, but as long as those 3 Immortals are alive, they're going to keep wailing away at this wall. 1 bunker destroyed, the second one soon to follow. And Bomber looking like he's going to drop this first map pretty quickly against
Yep,
Jim.
this is just too much DPS over here for Jim, and the Chinese Protoss player representing Invictus Gaming picks up a rather surprising quick 1-0 victory on Overgrove. You know, when you play against an Immortal build like this, Nate, it all comes down to the very first engagement that pretty much determines whether the build is going to work or not. And I think as a Terran, what you want to do, you either want to attack the natural when it's exposed and units are out of position, or you want to keep everything at home. But the last thing you want to do is fight without bunkers, and also you're not counterattacking, so you're kind of fighting where the Protoss wants to fight. So I guess some people are wondering, like, well, why on earth would Bomber take that fight then? I guess he just saw a window of opportunity and he thought, like, hey, those Immortals are exposed. I kind of thought they were a little bit exposed as well. So he made a judgment call, decided to go for it, but then he just didn't have enough DPS. The Guardian Shield was ready in time, and if the first push, if the first time you try to fight those Immortals, it's not enough, then you're in so much trouble.
Yeah, and with these force fields as well, the Medivacs not able to get those units out of position. The Zealots just cut everything to pieces, and bunkers alone will not stop 3 Immortals worth of firepower. They're almost killing the bunker in 2 shots at that point, and it's just it's a little too much firepower.
Like we said, Nate, you cannot really underestimate anybody. Jim didn't make it to nothing or for nothing to the round of 16, and of course Jim, his very first season of WCS America, this is a long time ago, but we go back to season 2 of 2013. This was the first time we ever saw Jim, the first time we casted him in the foreign scene of StarCraft 2, and he went very far. He made it all the way to the round of 8, and back then lost in a nail-biting series against Jaedong. In the end, he still finished 5th, which would allow him to play at the World Finals back then. They were played at CeBIT. Unfortunately, Jim couldn't get his visa, but he had a phenomenal run. Since then, he hasn't been able to repeat that performance. He's never been that far again in Premier League, but we know that he's good, and he had a fantastic run at IEM. So Bomber's going to have to be careful. Down 0-1 now.
Yeah, he's already on that weird position where you open up super confident, all of a sudden it's like, well, 1 game lost, and suddenly you're 1 series away from being eliminated. Of course, it's at the hands of this Protoss player, coming from China in the northwest position of King Sejong Station, representing Invictus Gaming. He is Jim.
Jim going up against a blue Terran player who's spawning in the right bottom side of the map. Was very confident going into this group, but now he's on the ropes. He needs to bounce back. Give it up for Bomber.
And I've always liked this map for some of the aggressive Protoss builds. It does kind of feel weird to say this, but the build he did on the last map I actually really like on this one, because those back rocks, if your opponent does have bunkers, you just go from the other side and you can crush them anyway. Which is, we did see a game recently where that worked out really well for Protoss. I would be surprised if he did it twice.
It's very funny how Jim works, because Jim is not really a one-trick pony, but in a weird way he's sort of a two-trick pony, because Jim either sort of semi-all-ins or pretty much all-ins of 2 bases where he really needs to do a crazy amount of damage to straight up win the game, or he takes a polar opposite approach where he goes super passive and he just sits back and he doesn't really do anything. Jim is not like Liquid Hero, for instance, who tries to run around with 3 warp prisms, harass everywhere. Jim is like, it's either like one or the other. Either he goes super aggressive or it is a super passive playstyle. And I kind of think, even though I agree with you, I think this map is good for the same build. I don't think you can do the same thing twice, and I think Jim is going to take a very passive armor upgrade Colossus build approach to this match.
I would like to see that. Of course, Bomber has a lot of experience in these intense situations where you're down in a series like this, so I can't imagine he loses cool or anything like that yet. But really interested to know where Jim wants to take this game. For the most part, Terran versus Protoss has become, I think, very uniform in the last couple months, which is why we've seen Protoss just try to mix it up a little bit more. But even that is very difficult since, as you mentioned, the Widowmine patch, it's been very difficult to open up with anything other than Colossus, which of course leaves you vulnerable to the ever-famous the SCV pull off of 2 or 3 bases.
The boys.
And, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much like the new hit album, StarCraft 2.
I'd buy it if I was a Terran player. I would listen to it.
I have it on repeat every time I stream, Roddy.
Mothership Core on the way, second assimilator being wiped in as well for Jim. So far everything looks very standard. I wonder if Bomber is again going for his 2 Rex opening, or if he's going to take it a little safer and goes for 3 Rexes, which you can still be aggressive with. It just works out in a weird way. You're aggressive a little earlier or a lot later.
Yeah, the benefits of the 2 racks build is just you get those medevacs and that stim a little bit faster, but in the last game, if you don't have enough units to kill a 6-game push, it doesn't really matter. This Reaper's trying to get some kills in, but there's nothing there just yet.
And it's safe to say as well that if Bomber would have opened up with 3 Rexes, he would have had a lot more bio units early on, so then it would have been a little bit easier for him to actually go for a small counterattack. Even just 6 to 8 Marines running into a mineral line can completely cripple a 2-base Protoss push, whether it's an Immortal all-in or just straight up gateways. Counterattacking is amazing. The last thing you want to do is just fight in the middle of the map. We see a Stargate being wiped in for Jim. We've seen him do this in the past as well. Sometimes just single Oracle into nothing. Sometimes he goes single Oracle into a lot of Phoenixes, which he still busts out once in a Blue Moon, but I kind of think it's just an Oracle to sort of dictate the pace of the game, try to get a good scout off, pick off a few SCVs if you can, but above all just go up to Colossus behind this as quick as possible.
I think if he ran that Reaper in instead of moving it outside the natural, he might have been able to spot that Stargate. The build order doesn't necessarily leave him at a disadvantage. You want to just keep 6 Marines positioned, and he has the Marines, most of them, on his ramp in between his main and his natural, so that he can flexibly move between the 2 of them. But if that Oracle came in and get a little bit of damage done, things could get tricky.
It is kind of important for Bomber that he picks up on this, especially because, normally if you go into a series against the Protoss, you always worry about Oracles. But if game 1 is an Immortal all-in, then often the last thing you think about in game number 2 is an Oracle flying in your main, especially when you go up against someone like Jim. But like I said before, if Bomber did his homework, which in all honesty I kind of doubt he did, because he seemed so confident that I don't really see Bomber Sunday evening going through replays of Jim on SC2 gears.
He's like on his flight over, he's like, well, I had his Wi-Fi on this flight. I could look up the VODs of Jim or
Spider-Man 2. Alright, I know what I'm going for. It's like, well, Bomber. Oracle so far completely undetected. Most of the Marines are still, well, there are a couple of Marines in the natural, so that works out very well for Bomber, because those Marines were not in position in the main, I believe. Actually had a couple of Marines in the main base as well, in the middle lane.
Bomber's prepared,
Yep.
in true Bomber style. He's like, okay, I've got enough forces, I might as well split them around. His Reaper being at the front of Jim's base is why he's so comfortable with, by the way, with moving those units in between his mineral lines, since he knows it's very unlikely he's going to get attacked at the front if none of the forces have actually left Jim's base.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There is a Phoenix on the production tab. Of course, the robotic facility got wiped in as well, and now we see that the Robo Bay is starting for Jim. But a Phoenix, so he's going to commit a little bit to this Phoenix play. There is a good chance that he's going to hide his Phoenixes, that he just keeps 3, 4, 5 Phoenixes on the left or right side of his base, and waits until Bomber actually moves out with his medevacs and tries to drop. We've seen that work out great in the past, but I'm pretty sure that Bomber is at least aware of that being a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of potential here with Bomber's build, because it gives him that slightly faster medevac count. But the Phoenix is just a great natural way to deflect those types of early pushes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult. You can't really run into the natural if there's a photon overcharge as well, and a bunch of gateway units and a few Phoenixes chipping away at your medevacs, and trying to drop against Phoenix play is also very risky. So I think as soon as Bomber sees what he's up against, I think the best thing he could do, Nate, is drop another command center, even before Rex number 4 and 5.
Oh, this Oracle sees the medevacs leaving. Okay, he's going to try to drop on top of this. Oracle does escape, but Jim seeing those medevacs, I want to know where these Phoenix are headed. Yeah, he's pulling them over. And he's saying, yeah, just try to drop me. Just try. And this could get ugly very quickly for Bomber.
Yes.
Just if he loses any of these forces, seriously, this is a really bad position to be in.
Yep. He does drop to command center number 3 before Rex number 4 and 5, and I think this is super important against a defensive 2-base Protoss. I think this makes so much sense. Trying to get Rex number 4 and 5 out right now when you can't really break a Protoss that's going to be quite comfortable on 2 bases anyway. This makes a lot of sense. All of the Marines stem forward. He got to get the Mothership Core, but that's about it. Now the Phoenixes could actually try to chase one of these medevacs.
Yeah, he trades 6 Marines for the Mothership Core. I mean,
okay.
it's not terrible, but he sees that Colossus and a lot of gateway units, so...
This surprises me a little bit, Nate. Jim feels confident enough to already go up to 3 bases, 10-minute and 30-second mark, while he hasn't even scouted the main for a while. He does still have the Oracle there and the Observer, but he hasn't moved it in a while. I have to close eye on it. So he does. I don't think he even knows.
Yeah, well, he moved out with those medevacs, so these Vikings come out. They want to try to push the forces away, but he didn't know about the rest of that push on the top right side. So these bioforces, they should be able to stem in and force a cancel, but they cannot fight this army directly.
And that's great news for Bomber, because if he wouldn't have been able to do that, he really would have been a little bit behind, because Jim, does something that is considered a little different, at least for a lot of Protoss players in this day and age, especially if they open up with Phoenixes and Colossus. Jim is going to try to do it again, but again this Nexus will be cancelled. This time it won't even be cancelled. So that's 500 minerals down the drain for Jim. That's going to set him back a little bit.
Yeah, this is already starting to pick up a couple nice things for Bomber. Second Stargate being added on really shows that Jim wants to commit to this Phoenix heavy play as he starts at that third Nexus once again. Armory does kick off for Bomber. Other important things to note, Jim does have a forge, but no upgrades. He's not researching any upgrades. He doesn't have any. He's just got this forge, I guess, for
He got an
style.
A cannon.
Yeah, A cannon. Okay, for that cannon.
A couple of units will be dropped in the main base. These Marines are misrallied, so the Colossus are going to have a field day on that. The second Stargate will get cancelled. But this is a little bit tricky for Jim, because the Phoenixes can't just hover above those Marines. They will all die. And this drop is doing a little bit more damage than I think it should have done.
Yeah, well, he wants to force the pickup, and then the Phoenix, of course, want to try to chase these medevacs. The Frozen Overcharge does help. But if these Marines can unload, that's when things get really tricky. I feel like he has enough
The units are
firepower.
kind of stuck, because the Colossus will be able to reign supreme from the high ground. This is, in the long run, a really good fight for Jim. Wow.
Great control from Jim. He has his army in the perfect position to catch all the forces of Bomber, and I think this puts him in a phenomenal spot because he does have that third base finishing up now. It's not as early as he would have liked it. He had some, some bumps and bruises along the way, but he's got it. And this Oracle should be able to see that the Bomber is moving towards this third base.
The Oracle laughs in the face of danger as he has vision of like 9 Vikings, but eventually he do fall. You know what they say, Nate? If you play with fire, it's just a matter of time.
That's right. So many forces in the air, and even though Bomber is building 4 Vikings at a time, Roddy, I think we know, we've seen it before. As a Terran, the worst mistake you can make, they're actually discussing this on like Meta, I think, yesterday. The worst mistake you can make is to get aggressive against a Protoss player like this before you have the perfect army composition, because in the late game, this Phoenix Colossus just falls off really hard against maxed out bio.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this a lot in the past. When you attack, especially if you're on 2 starports already, which is a good decision by Bomber, of course, make sure that you have enough Vikings, and not just like barely enough. Like, no, you want to have an overwhelming amount of Vikings, because the Colossus are the only true damage dealers.
Oh, I like this. I'm seeing this factory in the natural Bomber go to build a tech lab, and I'm wondering if we're going to see some Byung-style Thors, man.
Yeah,
it's happened.
A Thor or 2 is very good against the big Phoenix club.
Especially since they automatically target the air units now. Those Phoenix, they try to move in on those Vikings, and they're going to take a lot of pain.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Just a single Thor or maybe 2 Thors helps out so much against high number of Phoenixes. +1 air weapons is on the way for Jim, but of course I believe Bomber has it on the way already as well. Yes, he does. So we can see it. Jim sees all these Vikings.
Do you think Bomber can break him yet? I'm not sure.
No, I don't think he should attack right now. It's 14 Phoenix against 16 Vikings, and there are 6 Colossus already.
Yeah, I don't like it. I think that Thor is such an important anchor in a push against this. And these photon cannons that Jim has built are also a really great way to deal with SCV pulls.
Yeah, and let's not forget that early game, even though that drop did a little bit of damage, losing 4 medevacs full of units. I like these missile turrets. That's really cool. We've seen that before.
Wow, this is...
Who was that Terran who played that great game on Nimbus?
I've seen Maru do this on Frost before.
There was someone at IEM. I don't think it was Flash. Could have been. It was a great game on Nimbus. Yeah, maybe it was Maru actually. Yeah, Maru against Sparting on Nimbus, I think. Anyway, doesn't matter. What does matter is that Bomber can't lose this fight. He has 18 Vikings now against the 17 Phoenix of Jim. It's a numbers game. I like the cannons from Jim as well. Perhaps that's the only thing that he has copied of Mingsik.
Both players static defense right next to each other. Picks off one of the Phoenix. He's really using this range to his advantage as there's no fleet beacon on the map, and the Phoenix are going to try to dive in on the Vikings. The bio is far back enough that it will not have to fight against the Colossus yet, and even these missile turrets messing up the AI of these approaching forces. All these units moving up the ramp. So many of these Colossi, Roddy, are not firing, and these Phoenix are getting laid waste to.
Yeah.
But a little bit too much, I think, to actually kill him yet for Bomber.
It was a really awkward fight for either player. When in the end, Jim does stabilize. He lost a lot of Phoenixes, but hey, he has Chrono Boost. He has double Stargate anyway, so he can Chrono Boost.
There's still one missile turret out there. This SCV is going to build another turret. There's no army next to him. He's a brave soul.
One missile turret is going to try to pick off one of these Vikings, but that's not going to work. Fleet Beacon is on the way, and that's a really important building. Of course, a very expensive one, because if Jim would have had Phoenix range in the last fight, that fight would have gone a little better for him. It would have been a lot easier for him to keep the Colossus closer to his army. Here we go once more. Bomber is really pushing the issue hard here. How many Vikings are left? 11 against all these Colossus?
I don't know if he has enough Vikings. He splits off a few of the Marauders. He'll
Those
pick
are
off
doing
two
really
of the
well.
Colossi. He has the Thor now in the back, but if the Bio all gets killed off, I think just Warpin should be able to finish off the rest of the Bio units.
Yep, this single pylon is so important. Just a couple of Zealots messing up with messing the AI of those units. The Tor actually gets a Colossus. That's pretty well done, but that will be the only thing that he gets done. Now the Phoenixes can pick off these Medevacs as well. And Jim is really starting to put himself in a pretty comfortable position. I think Bomber is playing a little impatient.
Bomber, yeah, exactly. He's made the classic mistake of just getting a little bit over-eager against a Phoenix Colossus player. The army is deceivingly small, but all those forces pack quite a punch. I mean, you just look at this army. There's not a lot of gateway units, but 2 Colossi, those Phoenix, as long as those Phoenix keep the Colossi alive, it doesn't really matter how few Phoenix you have.
The only thing Bomber does still have going for himself is that his upgrades are way better. He's going to have 3-1 bio upgrades soon against just the single 0-1 upgrades for Jim, and of course the +1 air weapons, but the Phoenixes only have one job, and that is protecting the Colossus. Now, good thing for Jim is that Colossus will do damage against bio units, with or without upgrades. Of course, it's better to be closer in upgrades than he actually is, but if you can keep your Colossus alive, they will still pretty much get the job done. They just have to work a little harder for it than they normally do.
Yeah. So at this point, still a lot of Viking production. I love that he's producing Thors, but Thors are going to keep your bank pretty low. So it's going to max Bomber out much more slowly than you typically see. And he will move out to take a 4th base as well. But, you know, Jim getting a 4th before the Terran player, it's very unusual in this matchup, and I think it favors him heavily.
I like this. This is the phase in the game where the Phoenixes can start going on a little adventure, and they're almost as good as Middleists in killing SCVs in this phase if there are not a whole lot of missile turrets or anti-air units in general protecting a mineral line. This is a completely exposed mineral line, which means so many of these SCVs will fall.
Jim is just picking up points left and right here in this series, not having any difficulty. Bomber senses an opportunity. His Vikings are up front. There's nothing really here to defend this 4th base. If he moves the Colossi here before the Phoenix get home, he's going to be in trouble. The Vikings come out, they will engage.
Oh my god. He just picked up 7 Phoenixes or something.
He almost got all of them there. Yeah. This is suddenly looking a lot better for him. He still needs to be careful that Photon Overcharge is there, but with the Thor, he has SCVs pulled with this attack as well.
Yeah, I think losing a few SCVs, as nice as it was for Jim, wasn't really all that bad for Bomber, because this will allow his army to get a lot bigger in the long run. He has 123 army supply now against the 111 of Jim, but the Viking number is not overwhelming. It's 16, and a couple of them are still on the way, a few of them are in production.
If he lands just a few EMPs, even one across the shields of those Phoenix, that's going to be huge. He does have ghosts. The EMPs are coming in a lot of these forces. Well, the Vikings are just targeting the Colossi.
I don't think he has enough Vikings over here. There are still 3 Colossus alive. Photon Overcharge is helping out as well. Most of the gateway units have died, but if Jim is just able to warp in a few Zealots to protect these Colossus, Vikings coming in from every angle.
That small force on the right side is so nice. Everything for Bomber is just trying to run through these probes to get on top of Jim's army. He does pick off all the Colossi. The 4th base is exposed. He has an SCV meat shield still here, and this Thor anchoring the army.
That was such a scrappy engagement from both. Bomber and units coming in from everywhere. A lot of sentries being warped in now.
Man, this army has no hit points. It's GG though.
GG is called. The Bomber will even up the series after a pretty funny game on King's Young Station. I love the 5 sentry warp in the final seconds of the game there.
That was an interesting game to say the least. Bomber looked like he was very close to making, as we said, that classic mistake of pretty much just running into the Phoenix Colossus player before you have everything that you need to kill them.
Even in that final engagement, it was getting really close. Of course, it was terrible for Jim that so many of his Phoenixes got intercepted after they went for a little bit of harass on the other side of the map. But this is still really close, and it looked like these Phoenixes and Colossus were in a good position to push out a lot of damage. I think over here, he could just pull back those gateway units. There's no sense in all of them dying. If he would just be able to protect the Colossus a little bit better. With 2 Colossus left and a big Zealot warp in, he's fine over here.
I mean, if this force doesn't hit him on the right side, all those Marines, they just stimmed, but none of them have any hit points. They're all about to die. So this was a big opportunity for Jim to make a fantastic defense, because if you survive that attack with 4 Nexus on the map and your opponent has no SCVs, not even mules are going to bring you back from that.
Yeah, I don't think Bomber could have been any happier about the message of the reinforcements have arrived, because that was a really good moment. Because indeed, if he doesn't have those 4 or 5 bio units coming in from the south side, working on his 2 Colossus, those Colossus will stay alive. Jim warps in a bunch of Zealots, and then it's so hard for those bio units to get close to it. And just the Vikings alone, they would have got picked off by the Phoenixes as well. So just having 2-3 Marauders there, pushing out so much damage in the blink of an eye on one of these Colossus, makes it easier for Bomber and allows him to win the fight in the long haul. Because even though it looked like he had a lot of bio units left, 8 Zealous and 2 Colossus would have taken care of that.
Yeah, I agree. It was a very tense situation. And now we're on map 3 of our first series of the day here in the round of 16 at WCS America. And in the top left position, this Chinese Protoss player, just one map away from the winner's match. From Invictus Gaming, he is Jim.
Over here on the right top side of merry-go-round, we have our Blue Terran still representing Red Bull. He has wings. Give it up for Bomber.
And this is a map I love for the aggressive openings for both sides. I think any type of Reaper play into a fast mine drop is pretty solid versus Protoss. I think this is also a solid map for Stargate, which we just saw Jim bust out. But Bomber, if he plays the same solid style that we saw on the last map, there's really no reason to expect anything crazy. And he's actually going to... all his SCVs were tucked in for a second. I was really wondering if you're going to see a fast command center, but it's just going to be another standard Reaper opening.
Now this is a pretty difficult map for Protoss in general to go up to 3 bases. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Jim go for another 2-base attack. Something that he has done in the past is just go for a crazy gateway attack, because those can hit so quickly if you really prioritize on chrono boosting out warp gate technology and you try to hide a couple of your gateways. It's a very simple threat with not a whole lot of depth to it, and you could say doesn't require the highest amount of skill, but it can be effective. And right now for Jim, if he would be able to win this best of 3, he puts himself in a fantastic position to advance, because we know that this is his weakest matchup of the 3. So if you give Jim one shot against either a Protoss or Zerg to advance to the round of 8, there's a good chance that he will get it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this moving forward here, because Jim, as you said, this is PVT. I think has become a weak point for a lot of players recently. A lot of Terrans have been having a bit more success in this matchup since the recent patches. So it's not one that anyone really looks forward to playing, especially against someone like Bomber, who, aside from that matchup might maybe being difficult, it's also just the skill involved, and you don't want to have to play against Bomber on any patch. And as this Reaper comes out, the command center starts. Jim's got to make some choices as that Cybernetics core finishes. He has a nice little bit of gas. Could just be another Stalker Mothership core opening, but could also get that very fast Stargate.
Yeah, I would kind of like to see him at least open up with a quick Stalker. Makes it a lot harder for the Reaper to get the scout off that it's probably looking for. Just a single Mothership core won't keep you safe in the long haul, because it doesn't have enough damage output to just snipe the Reaper straight up. So we'll see what Jim brings to the table, but what we do know is that if he wins it, it would be an amazing victory for him, and I think it would be bad news for everybody else in the group.
Yeah, well, just imagine you suddenly whoever loses that next series, if you have to play against Bomber, that's a nightmare scenario. He's the guy that you expect to get out first.
I do really like what we're seeing from Bomber on the right top side of the map. We see 2 barracks on the production tab, and that is so important. He also has a reactor going down to one of these Rexes. So this is a very safe setup for a map where it's very possible that Jim goes very aggressive. I like the 3 Rex opening.
There's another thing I really love about the 3 barracks opening on this map. It's so difficult compared to a map like Nimbus to force field this entrance into the natural expansion from the outside that we've seen players like Flash and Yoda, especially at the Intel Extreme Masters Toronto, bust out some incredibly, I don't want to say incredibly aggressive, but it feels very aggressive how fast they push out with a single Marauder, sometimes even just combat shields, and a good chunk of Marines, and they just run in and you just kill whatever you can. I feel like this is a very real possibility because it's so difficult to stop.
Yep, especially if Jim goes greedy, and it is a 1-gate Twilight opening so far. Now I do wonder if he starts Blink immediately or if it's a Dark Shrine opening. I kind of think it's Blink, and so far we do see Blink being researched, and this is also something that Jim has done in the past. These threats, they don't really have a whole lot of depth to it, but that doesn't mean that they're not strong, especially if you keep it hidden from your opponent. This is the build that you and I could try to do on ladder 2, and if it doesn't get scouted, there's a high chance that we will be successful with it. It doesn't really matter who the opponent is. This is just something as a Terran you have to be prepared for. You have to scout it, and if you don't scout it, it's really, really hard to deal with it.
Yeah, you always see the Marines splitting off in anticipation of a potential Oracle running in, but Because we, as observers, Roddy, we know that that's not what's coming. A 3 barracks opener isn't bad versus this, though, because as we see, 2 Marauders are on the production tab, so Bomber's already thinking to himself, he's like, I'd actually like to get a few more bio units out before I start my factory, and this does delay Bomber's factory significantly with how late his second gas is, but it gives him a ton of firepower against Stalkers early on.
Yeah, we have praised Bomber a lot in the past for his game sense, and a couple of times we even casted a game and we had no idea how he was able to make the calls that he did, and then we asked him about it after the game and he just explained to us why he thought what build he was facing, and the majority of the time he was correct. I'm not surprised at all. If Bomber already has the feeling right now that he has to worry about Blink Stalkers. Producing 2 Marauders at a time, this is the first time that he has done this. He has not scouted it yet, but what he did scout was 2 Stalkers and a Mothership Core, and obviously that says like, A, there's a potential that there is more where that's coming from, and that is more Stalkers, or B, you're trying to hide something, and what are you trying to hide with 2 Stalkers on top of your ramp?
Yeah, he's moving out on the map, and you know, in most normal circumstances, this push is like stupidly big for this point in the game. This is an attack that you would normally want to go for if you want to do a crazy amount of damage, but in this situation, as long as he recognizes what's coming, yeah, this army could absolutely annihilate just a pure Stalker force from Jim.
He's going to see it now, but he's going to end up losing one of his Stalkers immediately. Where did he warp in those other Stalkers? He does have all of his units still in his natural, so that is very good news. There is a chance that he can micro his way out of this, but I think he has to pull workers.
You just A-click on all these Stalkers. If you can kill these Stalkers and you trade your whole army for this expensive of a force, you should still be able to get some probes too if he runs too far away. Jim shoots at his own forces for a second there. Then just Photon Overcharge is not going to keep you safe from an attack like this. He's killed so many forces, so many Stalkers, and even manages to grab a couple of probes in the meantime.
Yeah, the 5 probes really hurt as well. In the end, Jim does stabilize. Losing the Mothership Core is not the end of the world because Jim just wants to attack. He's actually reproducing it immediately. I was surprised, but now he cancelled it. That makes sense. So it's all about the Stalkers now. Jim has one powerful attack left.
Without high ground vision, Roddy, I'm not feeling too strong here on this build that Jim has.
If he is able to pick off those few Marauders that are there are only 2 Marauders on top of the ramp. I really like this early engagement because he's getting damage done on the Marauders. He's going to get the second Marauder. No, he doesn't get it.
Okay, does not pick it off. The bunkers haven't finished yet, though. 2 more Marauders are going to finish up for Bomber. The Stalkers immediately blink on top. Just get it in the bunker. He does not get it into the bunker. The Marines managed to get inside, but Jim still doesn't. He doesn't have a crazy amount of forces. 4 more Stalkers being warped in outside the natural, though.
Yeah, the pylon is a little bit too far away, and so Jim is forced to blink back to the low ground, which is obviously what he didn't want to do. Now he's going to end up losing 2, maybe even 3 more Stalkers. No, it's just 2. That's almost
That's exactly what Bomber needed now. Now that he has Marauders, you just cycle those bad boys into the bunker, and good luck. Have fun to the Protoss, because you are not going to break that with Stalkers on the ground.
Did you see? It was so funny, because the SCVs were blocking the path of the Marauders to the bunkers. And
it's like, let me in, you idiots!
Let me in, I can keep you all safe. And the SCV's like, no, man, no, we have different orders. It's like, no, I'm the captain.
I'm the captain now. +1 attack and combat shield are about to finish up for Bomber. And I think that's pretty much all you need at this situation, because as late as the medevacs are, they are coming. There's the last blink coming in. Jim wants to hammer it home right now. He's picked up all the Marauders. The Marines are forced to him again. He's coming up the ramp into the main base. A couple of Marauders are going to finish up during this. He picks off one of the medevacs too. I think he's put himself a bit deep inside of Bomber's base though.
Yeah, a lot of those Marines are very low on HP though. If Jim would just be able to get a pylon closer, he actually does have a pylon closer, but there is still just a little bit too much DPS in those few Marines that are left. A lot of them are really low on HP. Look at it, it's all one hit.
Yeah, all these Marines have no hit points at all. The Stalkers still, though, with these SCVs tanking, it's quite difficult to focus fire these individual weakened forces.
I mean, Jim has done a really good job in resetting the Marauder count, which allows him to still have a good chance in this game. He has his blinks haven't been flawless, though.
Okay, now he steps up. He's warping in Zealots. Great for tanking forces, but now with these Marauders coming down too, it makes things even more difficult, and it's just not enough. GG.
Wow.
Bomber takes the first match. We had a nice explosive series to kick the day off. Hey, Roddy.
Yeah, very explosive there. It even looked for a second like Jim was still able to make it work in a phase in the game where normally if it doesn't work the first time, that's pretty much it. But because Bomber put only Marines in the bunkers, it allowed Jim to pick off all those additional Marauders. And for a second there, I really think if the first time that the bunker or the pylon would have been closer and he would have been able to warp in a little closer to the edge of that main base, there would have been a small chance that he was able to make it work.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting that you mentioned that too, because those Marines were so weak, but if you put the Marauders in the bunker, these bunkers are not going to die, and if the Stalkers try to run past, then the Marauders are still able to chase and give it a lot of extra damage. But this first blink, you said it, immediately getting the Marauders, even that one on the right side, he's not able to actually fight because he'll
Look at
immediately
those
get
two
targeted.
Marauders. These two Marauders try so hard to
Oh,
get
look
in the
at 'em.
bunker. They're like,
Let me in.
And then the bunkers took their seat, or the Marines in the bunker. It's like, oh, come on, man, really? Why you have to be that guy, Nate?
Yeah. It's a nice victory for Bomber here to kick the day off. As now you will move on to the winner's match. And we'll have to have Jim facing off in the lower bracket match. The next series is going to be Puck versus Czech, which I think should also be another pretty explosive one. Neither of those guys play terribly passive.
No, I totally agree. I think that's going to be a very fun series as well. Czech known to produce a lot of units. I still think it was a pretty good series to kick off the round of 16 here in WCS America. Obviously, kind of what you expect. Jim is not your Korean Protoss. He has a very unique approach to the matchup. It's either all out or very passive. I think there were definitely possibilities for him to win both Game 2 and Game 3 because Bomber looked a little impatient, didn't look as untouchable as I think some people thought he would perhaps be going into this group. But he does what he had to do, and that is win.
Yeah, Bomber, he's pretty good at finding ways to get out. Any final thoughts on that series, Kev?
No, but I am very curious to see what Josh and QXC have to say about it. So, guys, take it away.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, that was quite the series. Game 2, I thought Jim maybe could have it, but Bomber was able to hold the line. What did Bomber do right in Game 2?
Yeah, Game 2 really came down to those Phoenixes flying over Bomber's army. As soon as you lose a significant amount of the Phoenixes, when you're doing that Phoenix Colossus play, all of a sudden your army becomes much more vulnerable, much more fragile. And Bomber was able to capitalize that. He recognized Jim's weakness, pulled his SCVs, and made the engagement happen before Jim's superior economy could make up for that loss.
I was able to sit next to Edison, the translator, and also a member of Invictus Gaming. One, he told me that they changed the colors for Invictus Gaming because they have a new sponsor this year, so they did change the jerseys. And two, he is nervous, more nervous than Jim, because he's always afraid of when mistakes happen for any of the players from Invictus Gaming. StarCraft 2 is a game of perfection. When mistakes happen, we can see them as an audience member, as the commentators. I felt that there was a lot of mistakes from both players in this series. We've seen them play a lot tighter and a lot better in previous games. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair assessment. And it really started out in that very first game. The way that Bomber reacted to the Immortal All-In, his scouting was perhaps not as precise as one might expect of a player of his caliber. Didn't really see it coming early enough and then misgauged the very first engagement, kind of put himself in a position that set the tone of the rest of the series. There were a lot of back and forth, but a lot of each player kind of misreading the situation, committing to attacks that perhaps were not the wisest to do.
Let us know what you thought about that series on Twitter using hashtag WCS. Also on our Twitch page, you'll notice down below a lot of vendors that Newegg is allowing us to have a couple promo codes to get some discounts on some of the vendors that they have on their website. But for more information, make sure to check out esl.gg/NewEggEsports for some more information about the products, and stay tuned for those promo codes. We're going to get ready for the next matchup. We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned.